So let's talk about LL Bean sweaters. It's one of the most common outdoor brands out there, and the sweaters are one of the most common types of sweaters you're going to find in the thrift. So this is going to be all about LL Bean sweaters, what to grab and what to leave behind. First things first, the worst thing you can possibly find by LL Bean is these cotton sweaters that are just plain. Whether they're pullovers, like a regular crew neck like this, whether they're half zips like this, or this, or this, or full zips like this, these big full zip cardigans here, or the Henleys like this with the buttons and the collar, if it's plain and it's cotton and it doesn't have any interesting texture or print, leave it behind. These are real sold listings. Someone really did get $5.49 for this. Someone really sold this for $8.75. Why bother picking it up? You shouldn't. So plain cotton sweaters from LL Bean, forget it. Just don't bother. I'm not saying all cotton, I'm saying plain cotton. We'll get into the desirable cotton sweaters later. So another thing I want to talk about is, surprisingly, plain cashmere sweaters. Even cashmere is not exempt from the plain curse. Because LL Bean is so plentiful, the plain stuff just isn't worth picking up. These are cashmere. Usually cashmere is a pretty desirable material in a sweater. In these LL Bean sweaters though, cashmere in and of itself on a plain sweater is not enough to get it to sell. If you're going to buy something for, I'll bet you're not going to find this in your thrift for $5. I mean for under $7 maybe, but not where I'm at. And you're selling it, you're going to get $8 for it, or maybe 10. There's no point. So I would say plain cashmere, leave it behind. In fact, cashmere as a material for LL Bean has a sell-through of only 43%. So that tells you quite a bit. Wool, on the other hand, 78% of all wool sweaters from LL Bean will sell within 90 days. The other thing that's interesting is Shetland wool. If you find Shetland wool, that'll sell 110% of the time within 90 days. And merino wool, 146% of the time. So it's all about the wool, and the vintage stuff does really good. So cashmere and cotton, if plain, leave behind. Now we'll start with the most desirable form or style of LL Bean sweater, which is the cardigan. Cardigans have a 91% sell-through rate overall on eBay of LL Bean's cardigans. So they're very likely to sell within 90 days, regardless of how they look. That being said, if you find a plain cotton cardigan, you don't spend too much for it, because you're not going to get much. Now, the other ones aren't really worth bringing up, because pullovers, half zip, quarter zip, Henley, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, other than to say Henley is slightly better than a quarter zip or a half zip. So if you find a Henley collar, which is a crew neck with buttons, if you find one of those, and sometimes Henleys will also have like a mock neck where it's a little bit of a turtleneck but not quite and has 3 or 4 buttons, slightly more desirable than a pullover or a half zip or a quarter zip. But cardigans are where it's at. If you're not familiar with cardigans, this is what they are. They're sweaters that have buttons or zips in the front. Couple things to note, style names. People have come around to calling these kind of cardigans grandpa cardigans or grandpa sweaters, because they're the big V-neck and the 2 pockets, and it looks a lot like what your grandpa might have used to wear, so the name stuck. Anything with a full zip can also be called a cardigan. So any sweater that's kind of like a jacket is called a cardigan. Sometimes coatigan, but that's more of a women's clothing thing. You don't see that much with men's. So that's cardigans. They're the most desirable style of LL Beans as far as how the sweater's made. Next, we're going to talk about the most valuable LL Bean sweater you might find out there. And that is the Duckfish Moose 80s sweater. This is what they look like, and you could possibly get up to $245, $250 for them if they're in good shape. They have duckfish moose on them. And this is the deal. It's vintage. Like I said, it's from the 80s. People love these things. They made them in green and blue. I don't know if they made them in red, but I know they have greens, and I think there's blues out there. There's a blue right there. I think there's another blue. So yeah, duck moose fish. Pick it up if you can. It's very rare, but you will get up to $250 for it. So before we get into the ascending list of best sweaters to pick up, a quick note on a couple of style items that you may think about or you may find. Okay, sweaters, LL Bean sweaters with the polo collar aren't necessarily that desirable. So just because you see a sweater with a polo collar, unless it's wool or has a cool design going for it, it could possibly be trash. So polo collar doesn't necessarily mean anything. The other thing is vintage doesn't necessarily mean much either. Vintage LL Bean sweaters have a sell-through rate across the whole term vintage of only 56%. So it's not great. Just because it's vintage doesn't mean anything, because there's a lot of vintage stuff out there that's just cotton, plain, garbage, so it doesn't necessarily help. That being said, most of the high-value LL Bean sweaters are vintage. Being made in USA helps a little bit, but it's also not that big of a deal with LL Bean sweaters because there's a lot of them made in the USA, so that's not necessarily a pick it up if it's made in the USA type of thing. Okay, now we're going to get into the ascending from great to amazing. So with a sell-through rate of 114%, that means 114% of these style sweaters that are put on eBay will sell within 90 days, is the Fair Isle sweater. This is what it looks like. There's going to be some variation of this with the looks like snowflakes or stars. Most of the times it'll have stripes. So different patterns, different stripes, but it's always going to have the stars like that. The majority of these are going to be wool that are worth really good money. You will find them in cotton. If you find cotton Fair Isle, it's still worth looking up. Chances are high that you'll still get $30 or more for it. So that's Fair Isle. And here we have just some more examples of recently sold Fair Isle. Here's one here. Here's one here. It's just one stripe, but you can still use the term Fair Isle. Same with this. This for sure. This for sure. So you get the idea. This isn't necessarily Fair Isle, but it's still, you could use the term because it's similar. So that's Fair Isle, and it's definitely a good pickup, for sure. Next we have Nordic, or Norwegian, made in Norway. So this is about where it's made, and it tends to come along with certain style items, like this button here is a little snowflake, a Fair Isle type button. But this tag here, made in Norway, this right here, Norwegian LL Beans, 121% of the time will sell within 90 days. So Norway, wool, LL Bean, pick it up. Next we have what's called the rag sweater, RAGG. This is a type of knit that looks like this. Speckly, kind of chaotic. It's usually wool, but sometimes cotton. Cotton will still sell if it's rag. So the rag sweaters like this, LL Bean, sell-through rate of 137%. So they will sell within 90 days. And here's some more examples. Recent solds. I'm not sure they use this term incorrectly here, but you know what it is now. This is a rag sweater here. Little speckles on it, darker browns against the cream color. And that's what the classic rag is. It's like brown, cream and brown. Also, you'll see it with marled. You'll see the term marled in there. This is another rag. So yeah, get to know your LL Bean rag sweaters because they will sell really well. Next we have the iconic fisherman sweater. These are discernible by the big chunky knit. And that's another keyword for you, chunky knit. And that right there, just that keyword will help your sweater sell as long as it's true, as long as it really is chunky knit. So these vintage LL Bean or even not vintage LL Bean fisherman sweaters look like this. They got the cables going down the front vertically. In the middle they have a waffle looking knit. And on the arms the same thing. This is a fisherman sweater, and these things will sell very well. Sell-through rate of 140%. Within 90 days, 140% of these will sell. And they'll sell for pretty good money too. So let's take a look at some of these recents. 150 bucks, 129 bucks. The chunky knit fisherman sweaters, here's a great one, 130 bucks. 130 bucks. So yeah, that's what you can expect if you find a LL Bean fisherman sweater. Next we have one of my personal favorites, the Bird's Eye. Bird's Eye sweaters look like this. Most of them are going to be Norwegian, but this is a classic LL Bean Bird's Eye. Look up close at the material. This one was made in Norway. I was trying to get a close-up of the material, but this is the best we're going to do. So it kind of looks like polka dots, but you can get away with the term Bird's Eye as long as it has a look something like this. This is a way better example because it's the blue on the light blue or white. Yeah, it's much easier to see. Yeah, there's another one made in Norway. Finally, that's a good picture. Okay, here's what you're looking for. See this? It's a Bird's Eye. Bird's Eye LL Bean sweaters, like I said, have a really high sell-through rate. 149%. So we're getting up there. Each one I show is getting a little bit better. This one here is just Norway. So made in Norway. Doesn't have to be a Bird's Eye, doesn't have to be Fair Isle. Any LL Bean sweater made in Norway, 169% sell-through rate. So unless it's a real outlier, any Norwegian LL Bean is going to sell 169% of the time within 90 days. Most of these are Bird's Eyes. These are sorted by most money right now. So just to show you what the best ones sell for, but we'll go with ended recently. And these are some that just recently sold. And like I said, it's lots of Bird's Eyes. We got a Fair Isle chunky knit. Got a cardigan, Bird's Eye cardigan. So, okay. I think that covers the Norwegian thing. Made in Norway, definitely pick it up. Now we're at the final three. So, Ireland. Okay, LL Bean made in Ireland. These are quite a bit better than Norway. 217% of the time these will sell within 90 days. 150, 145, 130, 130, 130, $100 all day long for these things. Irish LL Bean wool fisherman sweaters especially, or it could even be plain, anything. These are sorted by the best, most money, but we're going to do some ended recentlys real quick. These are recent. These just sold. $50 for this one. $12.60 for this. This was, it has lots of holes. Okay. You might have been able to get a little more, but I don't know. This one here, $40. So 55 right there. 59. These are recent. This one here, 49. They cheap sold that. But they did get $13.40 shipping. Okay, so that's the Irish thing. Now next, these are great. These are the LL Bean Commando sweaters. Here's what they look like. They got shoulder pads, elbow pads. They can be made in England. They can be made in USA. They could be made anywhere. They could be vintage. They could be recent. They could be cotton even. The Commando LL Beans will sell 249% of the time within 90 days. This is what they look like. Burn it into your brain. Get a close-up of one of these. Burn this into your brain. You see this? Pick it up. Guaranteed. Okay, and now we're closing in to the last and the best LL Bean sweater you could find, and it's the Aran sweater. ARAN. Now, what this means is it's basically sweaters we've already covered, but using a keyword that for some magical reason makes them sell 366% of the time within 90 days if you use this keyword. As long as that's actually what the sweater is. So what is an Aran sweater, you ask? An Aran sweater is an Irish LL Bean merino wool chunky sweater that looks just like this, that's made with fine merino or any kind of wool, but traditionally it's supposed to be made with merino wool, and the wool goes untreated, so the sweater is knitted by hand with untreated wool from the sheep, so it retains all the natural lanolins and oils and stuff. The reason behind it is that they became waterproof in a way. So the fishermen on the boats would wear these things, and as the sea mist and the waves and stuff would smash against the boats and the water would land on them, it would roll right off of these sweaters because they were kind of waterproof in a way. And the big chunky knits like this added more surface area to the sweater, which also helped keep the heat in and keep the water out. So traditional Irish Aran sweater, if you find one of these and you use that keyword, it's going to sell 366% of the time within 90 days. So look out for LL Bean Aran sweaters for sure. And now closing it out, I know I gave cotton a bad rap early on in the video, but I thought it would be important to show some cottons that actually did well and kind of give you some context for cotton sweaters that you do want to sell. If you find LL Bean cotton sweater that's also a cotton blend, where it might have some silk, it might have linen, it might have some wool, might even have some alpaca or anything else, cotton with something else, it's worth looking up. If it's plain and has something else, you might not get much for it, but you'll get much more than you would if it was just cotton. If it's a cotton blend that looks like this, you're going to be able to just pick it up for sure. Or this, if it has the chunky knit, it looks like a fisherman sweater. If it's a cotton blend with the cardigan, if it's a cotton blend Fair Isle, any of the things we talked about, if it's a cotton or cotton blend and it looks like any of these sweaters, the Commandos or any of them, pick them up because it transcends the garbage of cotton. If it's plain, leave it behind. But the point is, cotton can still sell as long as it has, if it can get some style points, and if it's blended with a more desirable material, then it helps a lot. So don't leave all cottons behind, but if they're boring and plain, don't even bother because you're lucky to get $5. Finally, I gave cashmere a bad rap as well, but some cashmere can do well with LL Bean. The plain stuff doesn't. Some of it will. If it's a cashmere blend, just like with cotton, or if it's cashmere that also comes along with being in really good shape, just like new, or if it has a knit like this, the cable knit, or if it's a cardigan, or if it's a bird's eye like that you can do good with that. If it's a vest, I probably wouldn't. I would have maybe probably left that behind. They did good with this, but I wouldn't have bought it. So cashmere can do good if it meets some of the other criteria, like being knit, like this, a cable knit, fisherman, cardigan, Fair Isle, something besides plain cashmere. It's worth looking up. And if it's like a commando or a fisherman sweater, you don't really even need to look it up. Just grab it before someone else does, and it'll sell really quick. So yeah, that's it. Bye.